Right, so Liam, let's talk about it. Marks and Spencer's, I think they're great. They're getting bigger, but they were getting smaller a little while ago.
Yeah, picking up the conversation from the last hour, Nana, we reported that M&S have said this morning they're going to launch 20 new stores over the next couple of years, including in Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds and Liverpool. These are both full-line stores with all the clothes and everything and food stores. By the end of 25, M&S say, this iconic 139-year-old retail brand, they'll have 180 full-line stores across the UK and 420 food stores. But just sort of pulling the telescope out a bit, I think this points to the fact that you're right. Back in October, M&S did say that they were closing down 67 stores. But, stores open and close all the time in a huge retail empire, depending on local conditions. And this has to be good news, not just the jobs, but what it says about one of our major retailers with, retailing employing 1 in 10 people in this country, being a big part of our economy. They can clearly see some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. It's something a theme I've been trying to develop here on GBNews over recent weeks. I look at the data very closely. We had a GDP number last week, gross domestic product, that was actually positive when a poll of almost all global economists said that UK economy would contract in November. It actually turned out it grew, only by a little bit, by 0.1%.
But they were wrong.
At the moment, you've got to take your good news where you can get it. And I would put this announcement from M&S in that same bucket of not bad, maybe even quite good news on the economy after months of doom and gloom.
Well, they've done well, haven't they? They've kind of reshaped their brand when it was sort of failing, and they've sort of re-emerged. And they've been clever. They've invested in their food sector, which is obviously a real high
and
point
also,
for them.
Mark, M&S clothes, particularly women's clothes, they go in waves, don't they? Sometimes they're really on point, and everyone's going, wow, where'd you get that M&S? Gosh, that is fantastic. And then sometimes their clothes seem to be a little bit behind the curve. They seem to be entering a sweet spot, at least what I hear from my female family and friends and colleagues. They seem to be on and up. And again, I think this is some decent economic news. Another thing I'd say about what's going on the high street and for consumers in general, Nana, is I was very early in British broadcasting to call high inflation when my On the Money show started in September 2021, just a few months after GBNews launched.
Yeah.
My first episode was high inflation is back and here's why. And at the time, the Bank of England was saying, oh, don't worry, this inflation will be transitory, it'll be coming down soon. In the end, we had double-digit inflation, as some of us predicted. So I'm now saying, and I wrote a column about it at the weekend in the Telegraph, I actually think inflation is going to start coming down quite quickly now. We've got a number coming out on Wednesday. We've got the December inflation number coming out on Wednesday. The November number was 10.7, down from 11.1 in October, the month before. I talk to people in business. Cost pressures in the supply chain, they're still there. The cost of inputs that firms need to make the goods and services that they give us, sell on to us. But those cost pressures are easing. Around the world, shipping lines are finally starting to get back into gear after the trauma, frankly, of global lockdowns. Those supply chain knots and pressures are starting to ease a little bit. Energy prices are coming down. Petrol prices are starting to come down.
Under 150 a litre now. Yeah.
And so we could soon start to get into a virtuous circle, just as we had a vicious circle before of inflation. I'm not saying it's over. I'm not saying inflation is going to be anywhere near the Bank of England's 2% target by the end of the year. The latest number, as I said, is 10.7. But when Rishi Sunak said rather cutely, rather cleverly for a politician in his first speech of the new year earlier this month, he said, oh, I'm going to halve inflation by the end of the year, so from 10.7 to about 5.5. I think that's nailed on. I don't think that's an ambition. I think that's almost a certainty. The only possible fly in that particular ointment, I think, or a major one that could happen, is if you have another, I don't want this to happen, but another big escalation in conflict between Russia, Ukraine, and then a spike, an alarm spike up in global oil and gas prices. But if we can avoid that, if we can carry on the way we are, I do think that a lot of this economic doom and gloom, what we're going to see from the first 3 months of the year, possibly the first 6 months of the year, I do think that by the spring, summer, the economic news is going to look a lot better.
Well, it'll put a lot of wind out of the sails of some of those strikes because they're asking for double-digit rises.
Exactly
and if
right.
inflation is coming
exactly
down
right.
as it is, then...
And you're exactly right. Now, that strike, that inflation number on Wednesday will be a big part of the political puzzle that we're trying to solve when it comes to industrial relations and ending some of these strikes.
Now, positive news on the house front as well.
Well, positive if you own a house, because
I suppose so.
if you're trying to get on the housing ladder, you're wondering if your kid's ever going to be able to buy a house. You're a student watching this, wondering if you're ever going to be able to buy a house. They're not so positive. So house prices have been coming down since October, gradually. Rightmove, which is an estate agency, asking price, they deal in asking prices. They say the average asking price in January was £362,438, a huge amount of money in some parts of the country. Wouldn't buy you, a matchbox in other parts of the country. But that's a national figure. They don't give a regional breakdown. And that 362 odd grand, that is £3,300 roughly higher than it was in January 2022. So house prices, at least for now, asking prices in January are slightly up. But I think it is, as you say, Nana, that was because inquiries have gone up because Christmas is over.